excited to welcome all of you today to the live talk show, Looking Inward for Answers, made in India, made for the world, powered by HSBC. Here, we will be talking about the important areas we need to keep our eyes on that could directly impact your business. See, the world is going through a tremendous turbulence since the beginning of this year, or should I say, since the beginning of this decade. The biggest shock troubling people across is the uncertainty. Nobody knows, and when I say nobody, I mean globally. It means globally. Nobody knows what the long-term impact will be and when shall this end. But intrinsically, somewhere inside, we all know and have a feeling that this too shall pass, and we will be okay. Though every day COVID-19 numbers are increasing, there is a safely locked feeling that no one talks about, but believes that we are for 100% getting back to the new normal. We'll get back to living our normal lives once again. It's the uncertainty that we are facing huge turbulence today. And to answer this uncertainty again, information from outside cannot really help us. And it is in such times when we need to become intellectual and we need to start looking inward for our answers. I come to the understanding that we need to become aware of self potential at this time. This pandemic has made me realize that life is not something that happens to us, but through, with, and for us. The hard part for most people is to take responsibility and embrace this new way of seeing life from the inside out. And like I said, start looking inward for answers. At a time when the world is suffering from a deadly pandemic, my country, India, plans to convert this crisis into an opportunity and strengthen its fight by becoming Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India. The term was coined by the Honorable PM of India, Mr. Narendra Damodar Das Modi, during his address to the nation on May 12, 2020. He called this campaign as Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. He also defined five pillars of Atmanirbhar Bharat: economy, infrastructure, system, demography, and demand. He stressed upon the fact that this is the time to become vocal for our local products and make them global. In today's live talk show, we have the privilege to have with us Pankaj Vasani, business leader and finance expert. Pankaj is a business leader and finance expert with over 2 decades of experience in senior executive roles and as a board and audit committee member. Over the years, he has donned various hats: group CFO, finance head, CEO, tax, legal, compliance head, and member of board of directors. He's held leadership roles with Publicis Group, Vodafone, Coca-Cola, and Subros. Welcome, Pankaj.
Thank you, Raju. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Also joining us, we have Siddharth Kapoor, CEO Acme Solar Holdings. Siddharth has global experience of over 33 years in infrastructure and financial services, covering airports, renewable energy, real estate, oil and gas, and banking. Siddharth, a longtime CFO, has transitioned to the role of the CEO, given his broader outlook and value creation through business strategy and strategic finance. Welcome, Siddharth.
Thank you, Rajan.
Today, we are also joined by Mayur Patni, Head Retail Business Banking with HSBC India. Mayur joined HSBC in 2001 and has worked across various roles in retail banking and wealth management. Currently, Mayur looks after retail business banking for India in HSBC. Welcome, Mayur.
Thank you, Raju.
Alongside, we also have Anurag Srivastav, Group CFO with Sterlite Power. Anurag brings with him more than 2 decades of varied experience and is Group CFO at Sterlite Power since 2018. Prior to the current role, he has been in finance leadership roles in consumer, retail, infrastructure, and telecom businesses. He's earlier worked with Tata Teleservices, Industars, and GSK. Welcome, Anurag.
Thank you, Raju. Great to be here.
We also today have the privilege to have with us Dr. Paritosh Basu, Senior Professor and Chairperson MBA Law at NMIMS University. Dr. Basu is a scholarly academician with a background of 34 years corporate experience, mainly in finance, strategic planning, and IT enabling functions. His last two corporate positions were that of the Global Group Controller and CFO of two large MNCs of India. Welcome, Dr. Basu.
Thank you, Raj.
So thank you so much, everyone. As you all know, we have a packed agenda today to cover, and with no further delay, I'd invite Pankaj to kick off the conversation, asking questions that draw out some of the high-level perspectives and trends we should be thinking about as we prepare for the new normal. Pankaj, over to you, and opening comments, please.
Thank you, Raju. It's a pleasure to be moderating this diverse and finally curated panel today. I'm very happy that I'm joined by four eminent panelists who come from different backgrounds, who have decades of experience under their belt. As
Pankaj, we cannot hear you. I reckon we cannot hear you.
No.
Pankaj, we cannot hear you. Pankaj, I reckon we're not able to hear your voice. Siddharth, can you hear him?
No, I can't hear him.
Can't hear.
No, I reckon there's some audio issue with Pankaj.
Yeah. I think he can't hear us as well because continues to speak.
I also can't hear Pankaj.
Okay, let me give me 1 second. Okay, so can I ask Dr. Paritosh to give his opening comments, please, before we reach out to Pankaj? Dr. Paritosh, you're on mute.
I'm so happy to be here with all of you, and I'm extremely happy to be amongst the participants who are from, I'm definitely sure, from various backgrounds. In my introduction on the COVID-19 pandemic, I will just say a few points. I think in the recorded history, it is the worst possible pandemic and the disaster to humanity. Till this morning, about 9.4 million people have been affected, with 480,000 odd people have lost their life, very, very sadly. In India, we are about 460,000 people affected, and about 14,500 people have lost their lives. This pandemic is temptuously very, very contagious. It has disabled people and dislocated people, and they are not in a position to participate in economic activities for long. It has pushed back the economic indices of almost every single country and almost every single indices. But I am a great believer of India's resilience and capability. If I study the history of India, Mughals came, ruled India, made a lot of disastrous job in India, disastrous work in India. Of course, they did a few good things. Let me tell you, India built itself up. Then came Britishers. Lot of things have been done by Britishers to us. India rebuilt after economic independence and political independence. 1991 came the India's economic worst possible downfall. We have again stood up, and we have achieved roughly about 10% growth in those days. And 2008, India has shown the greatest resilience. So I personally feel that every destruction or every oppression brings in its wake lots of good opportunities to stand up and rebuild. And he only fails who doesn't stand up. standing up is very important, and here standing up means the revival. Ascension analysis, which I have studied so far, tells us that we have to be risk-enabled performance managers instead of risk-managing performance managers. And it will not only be business risk will be an important thing. Unknown risk will keep on coming to India and all over the world. So we have to keep ready ourselves. But I'm of the great belief and faith that disaster and crisis is a good opportunity to West. Let us not do that. This morning, I read a good economic information that the power consumption of India has increased. I'll come to that little later. But PMI and service indices for manufacturing and service industry has increased to 30.8% and 12.6% in May, then the April 27.4% and 5.4%. So service PMI has almost doubled. So I personally feel India needs to have a creative destruction approach for creating opportunities and give space for the new things to come. So I'm sure India will come up.
Thank you. That was very well said, Dr. Basu. Pankaj, opening comments from you, please, and let's take it forward from here again. Pankaj, can you hear us? I reckon Pankaj cannot hear us again. Siddharth, can we have opening comments from you, please?
Yeah, Rajam. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Rajam, for having me on the show here. I heard Dr. Paritosh and can't agree more with him that ultimately this is an event which is essentially a black swan event. You know, black swan, as you know, was a term coined by Nassim Taleb. These are events which have a very high devastating effect. They cannot be foreseen. They come as surprises. Now, and they have a very severe impact. This event, of course, of a pandemic has come after almost 100 years. And the question, of course, in many minds is that, is it an 100-year event? Can it recur again in the next 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years? So essentially, one can't predict when the next such event can happen. But to talk about this event, I think typically it is a pandemic which we need to be optimistic about. We have seen worse crises, much worse crises than these. Health is a very essential part of human life, and this is something which is affecting us directly. The more concerning part is that this is something which affects the psychology of a human being. And, you know, I'm talking from my experience. My wife had contacted COVID, and I have seen how the psyche of a human, looks at it so negatively because of the environment as well as the media issues which have been created outside around this pandemic. But luckily, and God's willing, she has passed it and she is very safe. She was at home. But coming back to this crisis, you know, when Nassim Taleb talked about black swan events, he mentioned that firstly, we live always, our mind is tuned to the current environment in which we are. So when there is no crisis, we don't foresee a crisis like this happening. We don't ever anticipate a thing like this will happen. But when it happens, the fact that it may be short term or medium term, but not long term, doesn't strike to us. And in fact, we always carry a high degree of negativity around it. And keeping that in mind, is something which is very critical at this juncture. We are almost 3-4 months into this crisis, and the effect of this crisis is slowly wearing off. The severity of the infection is wearing off, although the numbers are increasing. So there is, light at the end of the tunnel. But I think what we have to do is we have to learn from this crisis. We have to learn to adapt. We have to learn to work around it. We have to see how we can come out of it. We have to, and the long-term opportunities in this crisis are, number one, to improve our healthcare system. When the 100-year back, the Spanish flu happened, it actually precipitated a complete change in the healthcare system. And this is something which India, I think, needs to do very, very drastically. Second is, of course, to accelerate the development of a cure and vaccine, which I think is happening. And given the progress with which we are achieving, I see possibly in the next, probably 3 to 4 quarters, we'll have something which is workable. This is also a time for accelerating reforms, and the political acceptability of reforms at this point of time is going to be huge. The acceptability will be very much there from the political class, from the opposition, from the general public. It is also a time to see how we can change the way we do business and how to change the way we live. I think more focus is needed on environment, and more focus is needed on how our business models can become more sustainable. So I'll probably pause here, and over to you, Pankaj, Rajam.
Thanks for that. I absolutely agree that the world is reopening in phases, and that's the good news. However, the crisis is far from over, and this situation is still an enigma. I absolutely agree. We do not know how this will play out, end, or eventually end. And on an everyday basis, many hypotheses and scenarios are being postulated. But I absolutely agree when you say that till the time there is an approved vaccine or a definitive treatment or a herd immunity, it's very difficult to comprehend the full impact on an economy or an industry. With that, Mayur, what's your take on this? And before we go on to you, I would also like to add that some of the economists have compared this crisis to the Great Depression or even worse. You come from the banking background. So what's an individual take on this? And what do you make of this whole situation?
Yeah, thanks, Pankaj. So very similar to what Dr. Basu and Siddharth were alluding to, I think clearly the economic devastation that this pandemic has laid upon our country and across the world is known to everyone. But I'm again, of the firm believer that in the times of adversity, you come up with the most creative solutions, and that's the positive side we ought to keep looking at. I think it has accelerated the pace at which people are reviewing the business models and newer ways to do their business. It has accelerated in our industry, for instance, the pace of digital innovation and digital adoption. So those are the positives. In fact, just to quote an example, we have a partner platform called Global Linkers, and they have a very good feature on their platform wherein they can help small businesses to digitize their stores, digitize their businesses, and that can be done in a very short span of time. And in the current scenario, we've seen people lapping that up and ensuring that they stay relevant. As we are aware, more and more people are moving to online. Therefore, that's where the MSMEs also would want to be. So that's the positive piece that I think is the outcome of the overall pandemic. Back to you, Pankaj.
Thanks. That's a very interesting take on the pandemic, Mayur. Over to you, Anurag. What's your opening remark? What's your take on this whole crisis situation?
Yeah, I think various people have talked about uncertainty. And personally, I think the uncertainty is here to stay. Actually, nobody knows how it's going to pan out, what's going to happen, when the vaccine is going to be available, if at all, how effective will that be.
when would everybody in the world be covered by the vaccine, etc. So all those are open questions. I think humankind has learned to live with many of these in the past. So if you look, AIDS is another kind of virus, right? And finally, there's no cure for AIDS, but we have learned to live with it. We have learned to manage the virus. We have learned to manage the spread of the disease, learn to take precautions, etc. The whole medical world changed after AIDS came into, in terms of the things like disposable needles and all those kind of things. So I think every time something like this happens, people talk about the world is never going to be the same again. But each time, I think humanity bounces back, comes out much stronger. There are many new opportunities, new innovations which take place once the crisis hit. We had 90, Dr. Basu said we had 91 crises, and that led to economic reforms. We, as somebody said, we should not let any crisis go waste. It's always an opportunity. So I think that's what we should be doing. As a country, if you remember when the virus broke out, I don't know if you guys read, one British journalist commented that if this virus had originated in India versus China, the world would have been a much bigger disaster. But if you look how India has managed the virus vis-a-vis some of the other countries, we have one of the lowest death rates in the world. Besides 1/6 of population in the country, we have taken, I think, months and months to reach the 4th position in terms of infections. Our recovery rates are higher than now the infections today. So I think there are many positives. The crisis has led to many people responding well to the crisis and taking opportunities, helping people out. So I'm pretty optimistic. I think once we ride over this initial period of getting used to this and finding ways to work around it, I think there are a lot of positives and opportunities which will open for individuals, for businesses, for governments, for economies, etc.
Thanks, Anurag. That's a very good take on this whole situation. So as we move to the next phase of discussion, what I think we can do is we can talk about how this pandemic has impacted our industry, our particular organization, what we have done differently, and what our participants can take away from this discussion in terms of what is that actionable strategy that you have adopted, and how do you think it has made a difference or is being capable of making a difference. Let's also talk a little bit about any expectations that we have from the government, any structural reforms that we would want, we would expect the ministry to make. And towards the end, I would also like to talk a little bit about how this pandemic affects you on an individual basis. A request to all the participants, if you have any questions for the panelists, please keep them coming. What I'll do is, as we go along the conversation, I will take those questions and build into our conversation. Or, we would earmark 5 or 10 minutes towards the end of this discussion, and we will go ask that to the panelists. What would really be helpful is when you write the question, if you could also mention for whom the question is. Say it's for Anurag, so say for Anurag, and then you write the question. Okay, all right. So as we move along, I think one of the common themes that is emerging from everyone's take on the pandemic is that our ability to predict the future is seriously restricted. And the only way we could be successful is to adopt, be agile, and be action-focused. It calls for going against the conventional conservatism, and instead of curling up in a fetal position, we need to devise innovative action approaches. And as someone would say that you have to play to win and not just survive. Let me start with Anurag and ask, how has this pandemic affected the power transmission industry? How do you think the industry should react? And what are your recommended actionable prescriptions?
Yeah, I think power transmission industry is integral part of the power industry and infrastructure as well. I think during these times, both the businesses and balance sheet strengths are being tested. People who had strong businesses, strong portfolios of projects, had strong balance sheets, which were not over leveraged or not stretched to that, are being tested at the moment. And I think that's what will define the people who will seek this opportunity and who will sort of wither away with time. India never, in my view, had a liquidity issue per se, and it directly impacts our industry, and that's why I'm talking about it. It always had a confidence issue. Banks had money, but not willing to lend or not willing to invest in infrastructure because of various things which have been culminating over past couple of years, not just pandemic. We had a slowdown of growth, etc. So I think as far as power transmission is concerned, if you look at the power situation in India, we are back to consumption wise. We are back to at a stage which we were pre-COVID days. So we are electricity consumption is back, even with a city like Mumbai, who's still only 10% office attendance. We are still back to those days of electricity consumption which we were here. But if you look at the larger perspective on power, per capita consumption of electricity, India would not rank in top 100 countries of the world, and we are behind many developing countries. If you look at even the BRICS countries, Brazil consumes 3 times more energy than us, South Africa 5 times, and let's say Russia even 7 times. So there's a huge gap in generating power and distributing it and transmitting it, making it available for businesses and for countries. So Prime Minister Modi and government has embarked on a very ambitious green energy mission. There huge work happening on that. I think what COVID has impacted is this availability of electricity probably has put back by about 6-7 months on that journey. Projects were stalled because of labor not available during pandemic. Access to the sites were stopped. But I think given that background, I think what good has happened out of this COVID pandemic is government deciding to privatize distribution companies, especially in UTs and some of the key cities. I think that's a very big step from the government. Then availability of about 90,000 crores of liquidity to discoms to pay their dues, etc., is again a big step. I think so that's about the sector. But personally, for the company, we have concentrated. We are always sort of concentrating on keeping our portfolio profitable. We look for projects which are profitable, gives decent IRR, and that has helped us during this time to have a very robust portfolio. Specifically, I think we had set up a cash war room. We had like people have these brand launch war rooms or business war rooms. Very early, we set up a war room which was led by finance folks and business, etc., where we used to get together every day, see what is the collections coming, what are the avenues of unlocking capital, what can we delay in terms of bank payouts or and various reliefs definitely helped, which government had pointed out. But I think that's one important step which we took to create a cash war room.
Okay, thanks, Anurag. Siddharth, when we talk about the airport or the renewable power industry, which you have been part of over the last 3 decades, and there are a lot of news, a lot of reports, even the McKinsey's reports and the KPMG's of the world report, which say that the airport industry is going through an existential crisis. What do you make of this whole situation in terms of the impact on the industry, and how do you think? What are the steps that the industry should be taking, or the organization in that industry should be taking to come out of it? What's your recommendation to the organization?
So, Pankaj, the sector where I am currently and the sector where I have spent almost a decade, which is airports, are two completely, different sectors. It's like black and white in terms of the impact of this crisis. Ultimately, in terms of what has happened in power, Anurag has covered a fair bit of it, and in respect of transmission, but a lot of it is applicable even to the renewable sector. ultimately, when we look at a crisis like this, we have to figure out ways to work around it and work with it. Business has to continue. And I always think that in a crisis like this, there is a strategy called IAS strategy. It is representing, our very bureaucratic folks for whom I have great regard, which is innovate, adapt, and survive. Now, any industry in a crisis like this has to figure out what they need to do to innovate, what they need to do to adapt, and how do they survive. Like Anurag mentioned about cash war room. So let me first briefly touch about renewables. Ultimately, renewable sector was one of the least affected sectors. It's an essential sector, so it was kept open. And typically, our solar sites, almost 16 numbers across the length and breadth of the country, were running normally. We ensured there was a few teething problems to start with, but we ensured that they were running normally by ensuring that people are available at the site, in fact, staying at the site, and ensuring that things are kept moving. The problem was in terms of projects which were under construction. So where there was construction underway, so there has been an impact, there have been delays, and the government has been fairly generous in terms of giving extensions of time in respect of force majeure issues. We ourselves have had to take a hard look at our business models of the projects under development and even go back to the counterparty for cancellations or extensions in terms of these projects on account of force majeure issues. The government in terms of renewable sector, of course, has been very, very proactive. In fact, during the entire peak of this crisis, the ministry was meeting all the stakeholders once a week and ensuring all problems and decisions were taken on the go, which was extremely, positive from a governance standpoint. There are a lot of things that the government is doing on the renewable sector. One is they are talking about amending the Electricity Act, which I think is directed towards looking at payment security, contract sanctity, and how to improve the finances of the DISCOMs. This is, of course, getting resistance from the state governments, but I am hopeful that given this crisis and given the situation where we are today, this is the right time to push this thing through and ensure that at least our power sector reforms are in place. The kind of money which is loss in transmission, losses on account of subsidies and various other issues, the losses are massive. And as Anurag said, our power consumption is so low. In fact, the per capita consumption of power is even lower than Bangladesh. So you can imagine what do we compare with Russia and Brazil. Coming on to airports, this is a sector which has got impacted extremely severely. It is something, of course, the aviation sector is even worse than this, but airport sector, which has got multiple revenue streams. One is the infrastructure stream, one is the real estate stream, and third is the commercial and the non-aero stream. Both the infrastructure stream as well as the non-aero streams have got impacted very severely. And real estate, of course, has got impacted, and people, of course, who are impacted will come back as tenants to seek concessions and waivers. The important thing about airports, which were shut for quite some time, and domestic flights have started, international flights are expected probably in August. So the critical thing is, how do you ensure business continuity? How do you ensure, firstly, SOPs are in place to ensure safe travel, which is what I think the government has focused on. In fact, the extent of detail in which they have gone to bring out an SOP for travel, which includes probably how you'll even use your toilet, has surprised many. And in fact, it gives a huge amount of confidence to the traveling public as well as the various other stakeholders. So I think restoring confidence on travel safety is very critical, and that is going to take some time to build. It won't happen in a jiffy. My sense is this sector is going to get impacted for at least 6 to 8 quarters, and a full recovery will happen only in case, or it will be directly linked to a vaccine coming in place or a cure happening. So any airport, of course, being shut for so much time, most of the costs are fixed and revenue streams are not coming. So essentially, they will have to look at cost control, which they are doing. Multiple terminal operations are being dispensed with, and single terminal operations have been started. And that is happening across the world, not just in India, but across the world. Costs are being looked at very critically, or discretionary costs and overheads are being looked at very critically to cut them down. Balance sheets are being strengthened, because this means a erosion of equity of the airport company. I'm talking about private airports. I'm not talking about the government and AI airports, because ultimately, for government airports, ultimately they will be supported by the government. But private airports typically need support because there is no incoming cash and cash is going out through the banks. So the government, of course, has not done much, at least in India. Across the world, they have done a significant amount in terms of supporting airlines and airports. But in India, they have not done much. The only reforms they have talked about is to optimize the airspace, to do something about the MRO industry, which is actually a very good reform, and also talk about privatizing more airports. But I think so essentially all airports in India which are private, and there are a number of them, and most of them, and in fact all of them handle almost 70% of the traffic of the country. So they are in a situation today where they have to fend for themselves. Airports will have to raise equity, improve their balance sheet. The moratoriums have helped. It has, the bank moratoriums have helped them. The government also has given them some moratorium in terms of payment of revenue share, so which has improved the liquidity situation. My sense is that as things pan out over the next few quarters, we are seeing, at least in this sector, what I call a Nike-shaped recovery, which is going to take at least 6 to 8 quarters before you will achieve the pre-COVID levels. Renewable sector, I think, is, as Anurag also mentioned, your power consumption has gone up. It is practically, very close to pre-COVID levels, and renewable sector has been running as is, without any interruption. There have been a few delays from payments of discoms, but that has not been very rampant. We have been chasing discoms to ensure payments of time, and discoms also have realized, and the government and ministry has helped tremendously in this. So my sense is that airports need to be much more cautious, much more proactive, much more aggressive to see that how they can ensure that their balance sheets are protected. The long-term solvency is there for airports. The problem is the liquidity crisis, which needs to be tidied over. And that is something which I think has to be looked at very, very carefully. And whether it is in form of additional infusion of cash, in the form of equity, debt, cost reduction, other revenue enhancements, all this will have to be done in a very, very proactive manner.
So Siddharth, do you think there could be a unique source of revenue when it comes to the airport industry? For instance, globally, what a lot of airports are doing is they're opening up the airports for general public. If the airport is between two connecting stations, they are allowing shops to open and people can visit, etc. Unfortunately, that's not the case in India. Typically, the airports are situated at the far end of the city. And I was reading about a lot of airport CEOs, private airport CEOs, talking about some unique or new stream of revenue. Your thoughts on that? Do you think there could be a creative revenue stream?
So, airport cities and, developing land around airports for commercial purposes is not new. It is a well-established concept. You have seen Delhi is doing that in the terms of AeroCity. Bangalore has started doing it, although Bangalore and Hyderabad are actually not city airports. They're outside the city, and Delhi is a city airport. So, but despite the fact that Bangalore and Hyderabad are outside the city, but still, I think there is a great focus on developing the real estate around the airports. And it is not necessarily just in terms of consumer-related real estate, but also in terms of business-related, whether it is in terms of commercial office space, it is in terms of warehouses, it is in terms of cargo facilities, ground handling facilities. In fact, Amazon has opened one of its fulfillment centers in a very high-tech fulfillment center on airport land in Hyderabad. So these are the revenue streams which have been tapped for quite some time, not just because of COVID. During this time, of course, see, this is something which you can't do in a jiffy. It takes time, and this is not the right time to actually start, monetizing your real estate, which has not yet been monetized, because I doubt you will get any significant value. And these are not things which can be done in a matter of 2-3 months. It takes at least 6 months to a year before you can actually bid them out and get the revenue streams in place. So for airports, they will have to look at more revenue streams for the traveling public. My sense is that this is actually an opportunity for them, because this crisis will shift a significant number of rail passengers who are on the marginal end to air travel, who were typically traveling by rail, but now will shift to air travel, because essentially the time involved in travel is lower, number one. Number two, the protocols that have been set up give more confidence in terms of security and safety. So in the long run, I think the recovery rate is going to take them well beyond the growth which was anticipated. But as I said, the crisis is probably 6 to 8 quarters, and that needs to be tided over.
Thanks, sir. That's very informative. Let's talk about micro, small, and medium enterprises. Paritosh, what do you think is the impact of this crisis on MSME sector, and what is your recommended actionable prescription to them? Dr. Basu, is it just me or we can't hear you?
I think he's on mute.
Yeah.
Dr. Basu, you're on mute.
Now we can hear you.
Now can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for the.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to.
Pankaj, I have a couple of points to take, but I can apprehend that you will be asking me question about what industry can expect, particularly MSME sector can expect from the perspective of government to do for them. I will take where Siddharth has left us. Siddharth has said that long-term prospect is definitely there, but presently there is a question of liquidity crisis, and to a little extent the order issues also. Now from there, let me take a few minutes and share my thoughts on this. First, let me give a message to the MSME entrepreneurs that you have to believe on your own strength, and you have to believe and love your own entrepreneurship capability. You have brought the business to a particular stage, and you will be able to take it to another particular stage. But one thing is sure, that what has brought you here will not be able to take you there. So you have to change your business strategies and way of doing things. So what has to be done? The first thing you have to do is, for your immediate survival, avail of the benefits and the policy promulgation which the Government of India has given. If those are not forthcoming to you, please knock the door. That's the first point. The second point is, immediately work on your strength, weakness, opportunities, threats, and challenges. I'm pretty sure about it that you will be able to work on certain aspects of it. Maybe weakness and threat part, you have to take expert help. And as the startup industry has shown us and taught us, let us not make the cash payment. Some of the consultants and the experts will be able to help you by taking an equity share in your business. So I'm sure that could be one of the way of handling the thing. The next point is, get into an expert recommendation in respect of your specific industry. If you believe that what you are doing, you will be able to do going forward also, maybe that would be difficult. So bringing a fresh air in the form of a young manager with you or from any other expert, that would be very good for you. Now let me come to government, and it need not be government. It is Chamber of Commerce, government, NGOs, startups. Everybody together has to get into these suggestions which I am bringing out now. First is, I feel that there has to be a state-wise government group and industry group-wise expert groups who will be working on minimization of value destruction and maximization of value creation, because our MSMEs have got tremendous amount of potential. So I feel that these experts team should be formed by government and the Chamber of Commerce collaboration, and those people should be allowed to work on the industry, and industry should also welcome them with open hands to suggest. Could be some of the industrial units which are not doing well from the bank's perspective, they can be proactively sent by the banks to all those. I will urge upon bank and government to help in setting up two B2B platforms. One B2B platforms is a materials bazaar or input bazaar for the MSME sector, where you should be introducing a state-wise bazaar, like we consumers can buy from B2B e-platform, why not MSMEs can buy? Similarly, a B2B platform has to be opened up for MSMEs to showcase their product and sell their products. And these B2B platforms will stop intermediation, which is a cost to MSME sector. And my next recommendation, which will solve quite a bit of finance problem, is toll manufacturing, that is contract manufacturing. Many large-scale sectors are already having ancillarization, but ancillarization is not the only answer. Along with ancillarization, one has to come for toll manufacturing, and I'm sure Mayur will be noting this point when we will be elaborating his points together. Next comes the encouragement of finance. So my point for you, the bankers, are very simple. Do an end-to-end value chain financing deal with MSMEs now. Don't do part deal. My first suggestion is look at their long-term requirement, give them escrow facility, and take out the fear psychosis that is what is escrow facility. This escrow facility will help them to make repayment of loan and also help them to collect from the receivable sector. So link the buyer and the lender together. Buyer means the customer of MSME sector, and the lender together. Could be at times the vendor also come to this escrow facility and create a collaborative bondage of finance movement through a blockchain platform. This blockchain platform of end-to-end loan management would be definitely a good point. I personally believe that MSME sector takes care about 30 to 40% of India's export. MSME, I don't mean here cottage industry. I'm talking about all MSME as defined by government. So there you should be having a EXIM facility, another end-to-end value chain of financing, starting with LC limit, buyer's credit if they have got imports, then export credit, both pre-shipment and post-shipment credit, so that they can take care of the advantage of a little lesser rate of loan. My next question is, can Chamber of Commerce and banks together introduce a factoring service which will help receivables management for MSMEs who sells to small players and not to large industries or government of India? And from the operations side and the finance side, to strengthen Indian MSME sector, I personally feel that the finance, compliance and reporting is a very important point, and record keeping. So I suggest that India should promote shared CFO services, which has already come up in India. And for these shared CFO services, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, in collaboration of Ministry of MSMEs and the Chamber of Commerce, can design certain standards and SOPs, what these shared CFO services people will observe, because they will get the best of the professional services, yet at the same time they will not have to keep a CFO like many of us. So that will improve accounting, reporting, that will import expert advisory service and compliance management. And Pankaj, if I may take apprehend one question, is digital transformation. So let me cover this here itself because it will set the context. You see, I write every month a monthly column in the management accountant, accountant, cost accountant. Can you hear me? I have already written 10 papers, and for MSME sector, I will just give a few brief suggestions. My first suggestion is encourage them to get into cloud computing, and for that, imposing a kind of dependence and a kind of faith and belief, government can start a cloud of its own, or MSME industry can start, or a chamber of commerce can start. The next is help them to implement artificially intelligence IoTs for manufacturing purposes, including machine management and machine maintenance purposes. Blockchain as a platform should be used for a couple of purposes. And those need not be an MSME to invest. These blockchains can be shared platforms. The first could be for that B2B virtual marketplace, both for buying and the selling. Next is lending place, which should be end-to-end loan management place. And there should be a facility of cloud computing linked to blockchain. I also would encourage, please don't misunderstand me, I would also encourage selective robotic process automation by MSME sector, because digital transformation is no longer an option, but a must. Robotic process automation does not necessarily mean that people will be thrown out of employment. There can be a lot of other employment issues. So we feel that selective robotic process automation would be very, very useful. My next suggestion is establish a virtual stock exchange for MSMEs. When I say virtual stock exchange for MSMEs which are not listed in stock exchange, those owners do not find an avenue to offload their own shareholding, which they may be ready to offload at least up to 25%. They don't find a place, they can't find a partner. So my suggestion to government would be that give them a MSME through a blockchain platform. And my last digital transformation suggestion is to NASSCOM. See, digital transformation needs a lot of change management, a lot of training, and a lot of assurances. Now, NASSCOM as an agency can come forward and create a task force for first generating awareness and then next training people, maybe with little payment, without little payment, government may subsidize, NABARD can subsidize. I do not know, model can always be done. And people like us who are ready to volunteer their services after retirement from active corporate life, I'm sure all the speakers present here would support me that NASSCOM should get into digital transformation of MSME sector. I'll stop there. I have a couple of suggestions further. If we find some time, we'll work on it.
Thanks, Paritosh. Great points and a lot of food for thought. Mayur, the MSME sector is at a precarious position now. To help the MSME sector, I believe HSBC has been offering some services, and we were talking a couple days back about loan against property and loan against FD. Would you like to, talk a little bit about what those offerings are, and if you could also, highlight how does this help the ecosystem?
Yes, thanks, Pankaj. Sorry. So yes, what we've tried to do is to ensure that we can provide quick and fast and seamless financing to the MSME sector. For this, what we've done is we've tied up with a fintech partner to ensure that the loan against property is made available for working capital finance to the MSMEs at a faster pace, a more streamlined manner, and the customer experience is much faster, where they don't have to fill up too many details. We pull data straight through API integrations from source, such as the MCA, etc., uh, at attractive interest rates. So that's the whole idea. We are now also working on the unsecured platform and trying to make it a digital lending platform. So that's the whole idea. Now, our solutions, of course, are made in such a way that the various ecosystems, whether it be or the services industry ecosystem, can benefit. Whether they need help on collections of money, whether they need help on payments of money, if they need working capital finance, if they need protection on the personal side, the integration of the whole banking piece on the personal side and the business side. All of that is something that we make available. Of course, in the current times, in any case, the key requirement is how is it that the internet banking platform is state of the art and very, very robust. So that's how we are trying to help the MSME sector. Pankaj, back to you.
Thanks, Mayur. So to survive, let's go on to the next segment, and I'm being signaled that we're already running over time with all the technical glitch and everything. And I would now like to ask Sid and Anurag, to survive and revive, the government has come up with many policy changes and has taken a lot of financial measures. The slogan given by our Prime Minister is Vocal for Local, Atmanirbhar Bharat. We're all aware of Make in India campaign, the Swadeshi movement, etc. A lot has been done, a lot is being done. My question to you is specifically to your sector, and Anurag, will start with you. What are the sectoral reform that you would like to see? And what is that one piece which is missing? I know, Sid, Siddharth, you covered a little bit when you were talking earlier, but Anurag, what do you think is the structural reform that you think could help us elevate to the next level?
I think if you see the vision outlined by PM Modi in his Atmanirbhar Bharat and various pillars, etc., infrastructure is right there on top, which is the second one, which he says is fit for modern India and India's needs. But there are a lot of things which needs to be done for infrastructure to survive and flourish. And I can speak on more than an hour on this, but I'll just pick 2 points. I think one, he also, when he talks about the pillars and the base, there is a robust financial system which is present. And if infrastructure is going to be the base for taking this journey and for modern India, the financial structure which supports infrastructure projects is very, very important. I think the structural reforms which has happened in past couple of years or 3 years on cleaning up the banking, the PSU banks, merger of banks, NBFC, strengthening of NBFCs, bringing out even the IBC and all those are all in positive direction. But I think it's time now to sort of accelerate on that. How do banks, I talked about liquidity crisis versus confidence crisis. How does banks feel confident giving an infrastructure project a 20-25-year loan at a rate which is competitive, which helps infrastructure companies make money, is, I think, the biggest step in that direction. There are various sector-specific companies which do that. For example, power, you have REC, PFC, etc. But opening it up for a larger market, allowing financial players to be confident about lending to infrastructure companies, making a wider base from which we can borrow and construct projects is there. How do entrepreneurs feel confident or the confidence index on investing in infrastructure projects, participating in auctions, etc. Is again a very good thing to target and think about how do we create those confidence in there. On the other side, I think not directly related, but I think which we can benefit a lot is on the labor reforms. And how does labor, how, for example, even for MSME, there is huge number of MSMEs which cater to us and which provide services to us. how do they flourish and survive? Right now, if you look at MSME rules and the labor rules, they are more directed towards keeping companies restricted to a particular scale. So there are benefits for MSME, and then you have this turnover cap, which have now been sort of diluted and removed, and profit element has also come in. But those are all incentives to keep, let's say, I should not employ more than 50 labor in my company, or I should not let my turnover go to, let's say, more than X crores, and I would create another company to. So people try and find loopholes around and do that. But I think creating that environment where a smaller business can hire labor, or movement of labor and opportunities are there. And this all goes to my main theme, which I'm talking about. How do we create confidence in Indian entrepreneurs, and the word which was used by unleashing the animal spirits? How do we do that? Because there is enough entrepreneurship energy in India. I think that's where our advantage over some of the other economies and countries lie. If you let our businessmen flourish, if you let the companies flourish, provide them good ground to stand on, and give them the safety net that even if you take risk, you fail, it's not that it's the end of the world. I think these are some of the things which we can this make in India, and look inwards. I would also say that while this phrase was coined a bit ago, but if you look at some of the geopolitical events which have happened in last 10-15 days, it has become even more important than how do you create a vibrant economy or vibrant country which really is very strong and dependent on its own people, rather than looking for FDIs all throughout. Is would be my comments.
Absolutely.
Because may I make
Siddharth, would you like to weigh in?
Just a quick rejoinder to Anurag. He has done an excellent point in terms of touching it. I personally feel, and very strongly feel, time is here and now for India to introduce a regimented consolidation of the labor market, particularly of migrant labor market. Huge and large number of lives have been lost, and their families' lives have been lost, and industry will definitely take a toll of not having their labor which they used to deploy. Time is here now to introduce a process of regimentation, of consolidation and polarization of labor from India to Bharat and Bharat to India. Bharat, I means the feeder position of India's C class to rural economy, give people to industry, and from industry certain people go to rural area for doing their job, particularly marketing. So this regimentation is important, so that again, if an pandemic comes, or if this kind of a situation comes, we do not suffer from for taking care of our labor who have left their home and served the industry. And also industry doesn't suffer of non-availability of skilled labor which they have spent time and money to skill them up. So that's the point of mine. It is not only labor laws which is important. Deployment regimentation is also important, particularly for people who are not located and their domicile is not in my area and would like to go away if their livelihood is stopped. That's the point I'm making.
Very valid point, Paritosh. Thank you. Siddharth, would you like to weigh in?
So,
the structural reforms that the infrastructure sector would like to see?
So, infrastructure sector we generally talk about as one large amorphous group, but it is comprised of many different disparate sectors, and many of them don't have commonality with one another. But one thing which is very common is the need for money. It requires cash, it requires capital. And if infrastructure sector has to grow, we need ability and larger sources of raising capital. And this is an issue which the government has been tackling over significant amount of time. So whether it is, the tax reforms for allowing pension funds and sovereign funds to come in, at zero tax, or changing the dividend tax rules. Now, all this is directed towards making infrastructure sector attractive, and also the issue of setting up of REITs and InvITs. So we need for infrastructure, number one, two basic things. Number one is availability of capital. For that, I think Anurag touched upon it, and I will not, belabor that point again. But what is critical at this point is that the banks should come forward and have the confidence to lend. At least if I look at it from the renewable sector, it is only the PFC, REC, IRIDAs which are lending to renewable sector, and the banking system is still very shy of lending to the power sector. I don't want them, let's leave aside the conventional power, but at least the renewable power, which is Sunrise, which is backed by PPAs, center PPAs, there is still a shyness to come and lend for this sector. So this has to change. The bond market has to become much more vibrant. You need, along with that, you need equity. So you need more investors, both domestic and international, who can infuse more equity. Because if you need at least out of 10 rupees, you need at least 3 rupees of equity. So all this is directed towards ensuring make it more attractive, and make it attractive for people to come and invest and lend to this sector. And that can be done in 2-3 ways. One is, of course, give provide clarity on tax and make the regulatory regime for that sector much more clear and friendly from a lender and an investor perspective, from a business perspective. Do not tinker around with it. Do not make changes every year, because these infrastructure sector is a long-term sector, and tinkering with it every year in terms of regulatory, tax, or the way you lend to it only creates uncertainty and lack of confidence to come and invest or lend to this sector. So that is, I think, the most critical thing. The other critical part, I think, is also the skill development and R&D. See, if we have to become Atmanirbhar, we have a very young labor force, which is a very large strength for a country like us. But is the labor force really skilled in terms of their ability to deliver? I think it's a big question mark. And skill development has been one of the planks of growth. The government has taken it up, so it is quite heartening to note. But that is one area where greater stress is needed. Second is, in fact, yesterday the Minister for Power had a press conference, and he, not a press conference, a conference of all the players in the power sector. And he highlighted the point that he wants to impose tariffs for imports from certain countries. We know what countries we are talking about at this point of time. Now, the question is that most of our imports of renewables is from China. Now, if we have to become Atmanirbhar, let's say in this sector, then we need to have, firstly, protectionism. We need to have incentivization for setting up large projects here in India for manufacture, not just the modules, but cells and the entire downstream chain of the equipment which is needed for development of renewable projects. And third is facilitation. These are all very critical issues. India is still 63rd in the order of doing business, in the ease of doing business, and it is way beyond many of the other developing countries. So this is one area which has to be given stress by the government. It has to become a facilitator. It cannot be a capital provider. It cannot do anything else, but it should become a facilitator and handhold industries to come and set up projects. And this can be done through regulatory certainty. It can be done through tax clarity. It can be done through R&D systems which are being set up. For example, in module manufacturing, cell manufacturing, R&D plays a very significant role. And today, one needs to set up large R&D facilities in the country, which can ensure that even what you are manufacturing in the country is sustainable over the next, say, 10 to 15 years. And last is, of course, skill development.
Thanks for that. All very good points. Let me jump to the next phase of our discussion. No webinar can be concluded at this point in time without talking about the new normal. So let's talk about the new normal. This term came into being in 2007, 2008 when there was a financial crisis, and then it was again used in the 2000. The world under our feet has moved at an unprecedented pace. To expect a quick turnaround is nothing short of wishful. A W curve, or as Siddharth said, maybe a Nike curve. But essentially, any recovery curve that would be there for any industry would depend on, what kind of product or services you are offering, what is your geographical location, and what position do you command in the market. What I would like to know from you, and Paritosh will start from you, when do you think normalcy would come to business?
Very interesting point, and I am a great believer of India's capability, and I'm a great believer, and I'm opportunist in terms of my own life. I had lots of crises in my life which I have come up. That's the first point. Second point is monsoon is giving us a great indication of revival of agri-economy. Third point is the geopolitical situation is giving us an indication that India stands a chance of expanding industry. The fourth point is India's commitment, India's youth capital's commitment, and the fifth point is our startups, our unicorns, and our unicorns. If I put all these together, particularly the young people and the entrepreneurial mindset, which is changing from becoming an employee to an employer, which I see in my MBA students also, I feel that India will definitely be in the survival mode ending by about 12 to 15 months. And maybe India will be put on a faster track of changing economic growth by about another 6 to 8 months. That means by about 24 months' time, India should be back on track, because I personally feel that not only India is a market for itself, but India has developed that kind of confidence in people's mind that it is a center of innovation for the world. It is the pharmacy of the world, and it has got all potential to become the factory of the world. So, given the suggestions given by Siddharth and Anurag, and the collaboration from our banking channel, which Mayur has spoken about, I personally feel that we are not very far from the survival mode to end and revival mode to start, followed by carry forward. I'm very, very confident that India will again evolve as it has evolved after Mughal period, British period, 1991 and 2008. India has got tremendous amount of resilience. India's human capital is excellent. India how to withstand hardship. Hardship has made us to understand that we can work from home while working for home also. So I'm very, very optimistic. We will be back on record, back on track within 15 to 24 months completely. That's my view.
Your comments? Hi, Anurag, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I think whether it's going to be 6 months.
Maybe there's some technical glitch. Yeah, go ahead, Anurag. Yeah.
I'm saying whether it's 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, maybe never. Nobody knows, right, at the moment. I think as a nation, we are a very resilient bunch. We have seen many hardships. Some people around the room would have seen scarcity as well growing up, and then looking at today's world where we have a different place in the world. We are also very compliant bunch. So we also, I think the more hardships you see, the more compliant you are with the government policies and with all that. So the way India sort of embraced lockdown, worked around on doing work from home, etc., I think is exemplary in my view. We have a large business in Brazil, and I've seen people struggling over there, not coming to terms that I should stay home, and getting sort of really worked up about numbers of infections and death, and government reacting very differently. So I think we are inherently capable of handling this. It's a time of uncertainty. We don't know when we are going to come back to a normal, or is there going to be a normal. I said initially that every time something happens, people say the world is not going to be the same, and it turns out to be exactly the same and much better. So I think we need to learn to work around it. We need to devise ways to minimize the impact on health, on businesses, etc., and just get on with it. Would be my prescription or recommendation of what would happen.
Anurag, Pankaj, just one rejoinder to Anurag's point. One thing has to change in India. We are essentially reactive risk managers.
Sure.
We have to change our mindset and train ourselves to become a proactive, risk-enabled performance manager. I repeat, proactive, risk-enabled our performance manager. So our systems and processes are to be risk-enabled. Like when I give credit to a customer, I check his financial antecedent. Similarly, for every SOP, we have to check the risk antecedent and value in risk. So risk enablement in our systems and processes is an immediate need for India to get into the next orbital change with a quantum leap.
Very right. Very right.
Okay, thank you. Siddharth, very quickly, would you like to weigh in say 100 seconds? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be quick about it, Pankaj. How quickly we will come out of it, I think, is a question everybody has on their minds. And ultimately, I think we have to dissect it sector by sector. Some sectors which have been impacted strongly, like aviation, retail, hospitality, they will take some more time. Sectors like power, transmission, these have rebounded pretty quickly. So there will be V-shaped recoveries, there will be U-shaped recoveries, and there will be, as I said, Nike-shaped recoveries. But essentially, what I am confident is that all sectors will recover. And it's important to note that there are certain sectors which have actually benefited by this crisis. And sectors like pharma, healthcare. There is a new industry of PPEs and COVID industry, which is sanitizers, masks, and you are getting everyday innovations around this. In fact, airports have started selling PPE kits and masks in the airport shops. So everybody is adapting to it. Everybody is, there are sectors which have actually benefited. There are sectors which will rebound quickly. I think it's a matter of, as I said earlier, 6 to 8 quarters, and we need to plan for it. And I can't agree, more with Dr. Paritosh when we say that, we have never planned for this crisis. Now, the question is that, is it a 100-year-old crisis? Can a pandemic like this come in the next, say, 2 years, 3 years, or 8 years? I think we have to factor these kind of events in our long-term strategy for business, which is, I think, was missing by practically everybody in, I would say, in the business world.
Okay. Let's move on to the last segment of our conversation, and I'm being signaled we're already running over time. This has been a very unique experience for all of us. You call it good, bad, or ugly, but it's a very unique experience that all of us had. There were great revelations. A lot of people at our personal end, we came to know that we are good at cooking, gardening, cleaning, etc., etc. On the negative side, stress levels are at an all-time high. There are massive layoffs, there are salary cuts, there's a lot of negativity about the future. Personally, I think stress is a great level. It helps you become a better version of your own self. So there's nothing wrong in having a little bit of stress. My question to all the panelists, and Mayuri, will start with you. How has this experience changed you at a personal and professional level?
Yeah, thanks, Pankaj. On a personal level, I think one of the key things which has happened, I would say, is that it has allowed me to just reflect back. The pace of life seems to have reduced or slowed down, and it has helped me to just reflect on a lot of the things that was happening in life, what should be the priority, etc. So that's one key piece for me. Professionally, clearly, I think one of the biggest things for us has been, I think we've seen the productivity has increased because we started working from home as an organization approximately 2 weeks before the lockdown started and continue to do so now. And we realized that the business can run working from home as well. Decisions can be taken. Yes, one of the key things which we have realized professionally is that decision making has to be much more swifter, and which we've ensured during this time. So yeah, those are the pointers from my side.
Anurag, what do you think about this? How
Yeah,
has this experience changed you at a personal and
yeah,
professional level?
I think a lot of senior positions, when once you apply, you have a job description, and one line there it says should be able to manage ambiguity. Uh, I think this is being tested, and to a large extent. So yeah, I mean, ambiguity is probably the most softer way of putting it. I think mentally, it has been a journey from where we started in March end, when we were actually ahead of before government lockdown itself. We were told to stay home. And from there to adapting, getting things done, and using technology, etc., to do this. I was a big fan of office and concentrating, working with team, meeting people, and all. I didn't think this was possible to work so effectively during this phase, but we all learn as time goes by. I think, yeah. So it also gives you more time with the family, as you were saying. I think people now at home know what you do for a living, how hard probably you have to work to earn a living. So that's another plus point. I think, though you see, I think your family and kids maybe even a little bit less because you are in front of a computer whole day. But yes, you know what's happening, and how family is doing, etc. So more, I think, more resilient, more level-headedness, more calmness has come in over a period of time, and it's been a journey to get there.
Oh, that's interesting to know. I was talking to one of the CEOs of an infrastructure company last week, and he was telling me that he's not working by the clock. He doesn't know when to shut down
Yeah.
because you're working from home. And he was telling me that the board, that his board was telling him that we don't expect reporters, we expect doctors, which essentially means that you need to give a prognosis of what may actually happen. Um, but what good a doctor you would be if you gave a diagnosis before the examination, and if you're examining something as fluid as a situation like this, it could end up in a very stressful situation. Without much ado, Sid, your experience on this front page.
Yeah, so like everybody, this has given a lot of time for introspection, both on a professional and a personal level, and reassessment of priorities, I would say. Um, First is, of course, as I mentioned earlier, also that the importance of environment, uh, and how do we treat it, how do we behave with it, and how do we react with it. I think that is something which is very critical. And the small things which we do, how it impacts the environment. I think this crisis has brought a lot of that to the fore. The second thing I think has been about relationships. How do we handle our personal and professional relationships? And there is a reassessment of that, and it will have a long-term impact, in my view. In fact, I'm reminded of a poem by Damien Barr, which he had written for COVID, that uh, we are not in the same boat; we are in the same storm. Some are in super yachts, some has just one oar, and each one will emerge in his or own way from this storm. So, and all this is going to happen because we are there to support each other, whether professionally or personally, and family relations, friendships, and professional relations. How do we support each other in office? How we are reacting? What steps we are taking to tide over this crisis, and what impact it has on our colleagues? Create stress levels or diminish them? I think those are some very critical issues which people will carry well beyond this crisis. And a more mundane issue, I think, this crisis has created is the importance and prioritization to health, both physical and mental. This has, as you said, created stress levels, it has created uncertainty. So it has also strengthened people mentally. And I'm sure a lot of people have realized the importance of physical health. Everybody's probably taking some health supplements and, eating the right things. You're not ordering food from outside, you're cooking at home. So everybody seems to be now, I would say, maybe they have put on more weight, but at least they have been becoming more and more healthy.
Yeah, either mentally or physically. Very quickly, Paritosh, 90 seconds, your take on the subject.
Yeah, 3 words have been spoken: introspection, prioritization, and reflection. I take it from there and refer to one of my papers, which I've recently written, of course, before COVID-19, is on knowledge. So, one point from there: life whispers knowledge. Please remain ready to listen it. That's one effort I get. The second point, another shun I will add: creative destruction. Please creatively destroy some of your habits which you used to have, and recreate and relearn and retrain yourself to become a better digitally savvy netizen in future. That is another take of mine. It has improved my fighting spirit. Even at the age of 66, I can believe, and I can prove, and I have proved that while working from home, I can also work for home. And the last but not the least, I have a typical responsibility to handing over a better earth and a knowledgeable earth to our next generation. Towards that, what all our speakers have spoken so far, if we make a synthesis of that, and if CPA Innovation publishes a paper on that, I think that will be a great contribution. And that will also help not only to change a few of us who are speaking, but also the few of us who will be working within future. So we have to be great change managers in times to come with a different kind of a knowledge. So learn, unlearn, and relearn, and creatively destroy to create space for new things. That's the most important.
That was good. I'd want to add my.
Thanks, Paritosh. Rajuma, hidden has been cast upon you to make sure that.
Yes. So
Sure,
I would just add one point from my personal experience. As the lockdown happened, as an editor, I became more cautious about how will our physical magazines that goes out to every corporate office will be sent and what will happen. Uh, Suddenly, what happened was the online soft copies of our magazines received more number of subscriptions, and there were a lot of our partners who want to do digital initiatives and want to reach out to their audiences to give more information, raise awareness, and put out the best practices. So our business increased. Now, as the business increased, we started to celebrate during the lockdown. The celebration happened over video calls and Zoom meetings. And I forgot one thing, that the family is seeing me celebrating. Now, as they witnessed this celebration, the collective shopping of the family increased. The number of Amazon.coms and Flipkart.coms, they rose up. So that has been a personal experience and a professional experience from my end. The collective family shopping increased. That was very, very shocking. But anyways, I reckon we are
Now
now
there is this new concept, Rajum, now there's this new concept of, I'm saying there's this new concept of revenge shopping. Once you get out of this whole thing, and if you have been a shopaholic, now you shop more. And I think that's catching up with all of us.
Yes, it's like for a foodie tasting food after a long time, I'm sure.
There's also lockdown shopping.
Right, before I hand it over to Rajum, I would thank you.
You know what? One more personal
All right.
experience I want
So to conclude, I would like to thank all the panelists for their time and attention. Sure, go ahead. I think there's some gap in the voice, so please go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
no issues. I just wanted to add is that the number of delivery boys that I've seen during the lockdown is collectively is more than I've ever seen during my entire life. Ringing the bell each 10 minutes, each 1 hour. So I think that's the case and story of every house.
All right. So to conclude, before I hand it over to Rajum, I would like to thank all of you for your time and wisdom. I would like to thank your innovation of the time and joining and hearing us. This was informative, useful to all of you. Until next time, take care. Have a nice day. Over to you, Rajum.
Thank you all,
Thank you, Pankaj.
fellow family members.
Thank you, Dr. Basu. I think we should also want to thank the audience who stayed with us for over the last 1.5 hours. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. I think this was a very informative session, and we all take this session as a gift brought to us. We are panelists today and by HSBC. The Make in India program is very important for the economic growth of India as it aims at utilizing the existing Indian talent base, creating additional employment opportunities, and very importantly, empowering secondary and tertiary sector as well. This aims at improving India's rank on the ease of doing business index by eliminating almost all the unnecessary laws and regulations, making bureaucratic processes easier and making the government more transparent, responsive, and accountable. Uh, we have skill, we have talent, we have the discipline, and we have the desire to do something. We want to give the world an opportunity that's come Make in India. With that, we come to the end of today's episode powered by HSBC. Stay tuned as we bring another informative episode next week. Until then, stay safe, stay happy. Jai Hind. Thank you, all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.